We have an extraordinary set of presenters and panelists that I'll introduce in a moment, and there will be a question and answer session with our panelists at the end of the webinar. So please put your questions in the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll get to as many questions as we can in the allotted time. For those of you not familiar with Water Now, we need to go to the next slide. We are a national network of water utility leaders and decision makers advancing climate resilient, equitable, affordable, and environmentally sustainable water management strategies. Our focus is primarily on helping communities with the nitty-gritty of funding and implementing innovative approaches, in particular distributed solutions involving private properties. In the Pennsylvania area, we've been working for the last several years with the Water Center and other partners, including a number of organizations on the panel today, on advancing green and nature-based solutions to address water quality and flooding challenges. And we are very excited about the release of this report. Next slide. So you see here the agenda for today's webinar. We'll begin with an overview of the report, and then go to sampling locations and methods, findings, and recommendations. We'll then have an incredible panel of experts, local experts, to provide their perspectives and reflections on the report, and then we'll go to your questions and answers. We'll go to your questions and we will hopefully answer them, is what I meant. Okay, next slide. Oh wait, are we on that? Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So as a scientific study, you won't be surprised that this is a report that is acronym heavy. All of these acronyms and more are defined on page 4 of the report, but these are some that we will use throughout this presentation. I'm not going to read all of them now, but we're going to take a brief pause so that you have a chance to absorb some of these. Okay, so with that, let me introduce the panelists who were involved in the development of the study. Tamara Mittman is with Michael Baker International, Greg Cavallo with Cavallo Environmental Services, Vanessa Thulsiraj with Michael Baker International, and Ellen Kohler with the Water Center. So with that, I'll turn things over to Tamara to get us started.
Hey, thank you, Cynthia. Hi, I'm Tamara Mittman. As Cynthia said, I work with Michael Baker International in the Philadelphia office, and I primarily work on projects related to sustainability and resilience. Just a quick note about Michael Baker, that we do take a holistic approach to water resources. We help communities address often interrelated water resource challenges, including poor water quality, flooding, drought, and even water rights. And we were excited to be able to work with the Water Center on this multidisciplinary water resources project that's, at least for those of us in the Philadelphia office, it's right in our backyards. So we can look at the next slide. Just for those of you who are new to this project, a quick background on what is the Delaware River Bacteria Study. So although the report is just coming out, it came out, I think, in December 2023. This effort started in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And it is a very interesting water quality and water policy study targeting the Camden-Chester-Philadelphia region of the Delaware River. It focuses on recreational water quality in the study area, and it engaged a multidisciplinary team to analyze water quality data, existing water quality programs and investments, and water policy. And because recreational water quality criteria are based on fecal indicator bacteria, there's one of our acronyms, FIB, it really focused on FIB, on the occurrence and sources of FIB, and on opportunities for remediation. But I would say above all else, the Delaware River Bacteria Study is a cooperative effort that aims to build on and support ongoing collaboration among all the amazing partners in the region who are concerned about water quality in the region. So we can look at the next slide. So just to give a visual of the study area we're talking about here, we're talking about what the RBC defines as zones 3 and upper zone 4 of the Delaware River. It's about a 27-mile stretch from the city of Philadelphia to the city of Chester. And over the last few decades, as we describe more in the report and in the appendices, this stretch of the river has developed a history of recreation due to improved water quality and to expanded waterfront access. At the same time, the recreational water quality standards for this stretch of the river are set to meet the FIB levels appropriate for boating recreation. So this is our study area. More on that in the report. Next slide. And what's really unique about the report and the effort is that it was a product of a collaboration among diverse stakeholders from academia, the public sector, and also nonprofits and community-based organizations. Just to list just a very few of these stakeholders, they would include Penn, Temple, Drexel, DRBC, PWD, the American Littoral Society, Penn Future, Pennsylvania Environmental Council. There are really a lot of people who are involved, and we tried to list all of them in the acknowledgement section of the report. So some stakeholders were engaged through meetings and others through group interviews, individual interviews. And what that brought, working with all these diverse stakeholders, was a more holistic understanding of the water quality risks and potential solutions. Working with all these stakeholders allowed the project team to consider opportunities and constraints that are just inherent in the socioeconomic landscape of our area, and also the opportunities and constraints that are inherent in our regulatory framework. So it's very important that all these stakeholders were engaged. We could go to the next slide. And this is just a summary of the goal and objectives of the Delaware River Bacteria Study report and effort. The goal was to identify some of the major challenges to achieving swimmable waters within the study area and opportunities to accelerate improvements. And it was a three-pronged approach in the objectives. So it was trying to understand existing fecal indicator bacteria water quality conditions, trying to understand knowledge gaps, and the second prong, understanding the timing and extent of future FIB water quality improvements from committed investments, and then finally identifying additional opportunities for improved FIB water quality. And all this is laid out in detail in the report. And can we see the next slide? And also much of the data that the report analyzed is available for you to explore in the Delaware River Bacteria Data Viewer. I think that Emma's going to pop some links into the chat so that you can have access to the report and also to this data viewer, which is pretty fun to explore. So that kind of wraps up a very brief overview of the report and the story map. And I believe I am kicking it off to Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. I really appreciate it. I'm Greg Cavallo. I run my own environmental consulting firm, formerly with the DRBC, and I've been asked to help develop the sampling objectives to meet the project goals and objectives. And next slide, please. And as Tamara had pointed out, understanding fecal indicator bacteria, E. coli, coliform, and Enterococcus, and their potential sources and impacts. So that was the idea, and with the goal of ultimately identifying areas that might be more available for recreational use. And that included sampling not only tributary sites and in the main stem and CSO outfalls, but we targeted dry and wet weather deliberately to see what these potential impacts might be. And using that data, we tried to identify what areas were more impacted or less impacted. And then Vanessa will discuss some of that later. Next slide, please. You know, we built on the work of many others, and I'd like to thank PWD, DRBC, and others. There was a Professor Sunger at, I think she was at Drexel, and then there was Heather Murphy at Temple University, who had done a lot of work either in tributaries or the estuaries. So we reviewed the literature and the data that was available for sampling locations. And we selected locations that were spatially distributed within that 27-mile stretch. And so 15 sites were selected for sampling, including one right at a CSO and one immediately below it. And these locations had typically been monitored by either DRBC or PWD or both. So in a way, we are able to expand the existing data sets by collecting additional data and then looking at the wet and dry effects. the real beauty is, next slide, please. I just wanted to give you an idea where we collected. Everybody has a map of this. The red and green are sampling locations used in this study. The green are the sampling locations that were used both by PWD and DRBC. So those are the ones with the absolute most data sets available to them. Others include some tributary locations, and both on the Frankfurt and on the Schuylkill, as well as the Cooper River. So a lot of these areas are used or can be used or have been used for recreation. Next slide, please. Okay. We looked at fecal indicated bacteria. As I said, coliform, E. coli, enterococci. The other thing we did, and we learned this from our discussions with people at the Academy of Natural Sciences, Dr. Salas at Drexel, we could do more. We used a qPCR method, a quantitative polymerase chain reaction, which basically is a DNA method. It looks at the DNA, multiplies it, and then it measures it and compares it to markers. And the markers that were compared to were developed by Dr. Salas. They're specific for the Delaware Basin. And there was a human marker and 2 avian markers. Well, an avian and a gull. The difference is gulls are gulls, seagulls, avians could be Canada geese and things like that. But what's of interest is the HF183 bacteroides is a human marker. It can only occur from human discharge. And we have to thank Dr. Salas at Drexel for doing a wonderful job in the analysis. We also collected and recorded field parameters, which adds to the body of knowledge, including, and it's not on here, my apologies, precipitation. So from that, I think I'll leave it to Vanessa to discuss some of the findings. Good luck.
Vanessa, I think you're muted. There we go.
I should be unmuted. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so as Greg has mentioned, our goal here was to better understand existing water quality conditions and some of those potential sources that could be contributing to the FIB that we measured. So these analyses were used, the EPA's REC 1 criteria for primary contact recreation as a basis for comparison. Specifically, we used the EPA's REC 1 geomean criteria of 126 CFU per 100 ml for E. coli. Okay. So on this table represents the monthly geometric mean of nearshore E. coli concentrations. And the data showed us that the nearshore water quality is highly localized and dynamic. Bacteria levels varied across sites, even at short distances. So if we compared Penn's Landing Lagoon and Independence Seaport Museum, we found that Independence Seaport Museum actually had greater monthly geometric mean values. We also found that the nearshore water quality varied considerably from month to month and from year to year. And so again, you can see the comparison of 2019 data and 2020 data. Higher bacterial levels were generally seen in summer months, in hotter weather, and then decreased in September at the start of the fall season. Next slide. Our second finding here was that dry weather water quality conditions are generally closer to meeting the EPA's REC 1 criteria than the wet weather water quality conditions. So if we look at the y-axis here, it represents the number of samples within the E. coli reference value of 126 CFU per 100 ml. What does that mean? That means if the bar was at 100%, it was always achieving the REC 1 water quality objective. And so some sites, including the Riverton Yacht Club, had notable favorable water quality, whereas other sites like Payne Point, you see 2 dots there, that means that the levels were always above the geomean reference value of 126 CFU per 100 ml. So dry weather conditions typically had improved water quality in comparison to wet weather conditions as well. Go ahead to the next slide. One of the other important questions we were trying to answer is there a connection between CSOs and the indicator bacteria concentrations that we were measuring? So overall, what we found was that the nearshore sampling sites with the highest bacteria levels were typically within 2,500 feet of a combined sewer outfall. We had one outlier there, but overall, typically the highest levels of bacteria were within 2,500 feet. And when we extended further away from a CSO outfall, the levels were much closer to the reference level of 126 for the E. coli geomean. Next slide. As Greg noted, this study was important in that we had supplemental monitoring that actually piloted the use of DNA host-associated markers in the study area, and that helped us explore whether they could be used in identifying hotspots of potential human waste contamination in order to prioritize remediation efforts at those locations. And so we looked at the HF1A3 marker. This is the human associated marker. It's been widely used and validated across the nation. And it showed that it had a wet weather effect. So we sampled over a 5-day period. Day 1 was pre-storm, so it was considered a dry day. Days 2, 3, 4, and 5 were considered wet or post-wet. Day 4 we had light rainfall on days 2 and 3, but the highest level of rainfall over an inch was observed on day 4. And day 4 is also when we saw the highest levels of fecal indicator bacteria, as well as the HF1A3 Bacteroides marker. And so the concentrations that you see here on this plot are actually the HF1A3 values in copies per 100 ml. So across all sites, for all samples, there was in fact a weak but significant positive association between HF1A3 and E. coli concentrations. And this indicates that some of the FIB, specifically the E. coli that we're measuring, is likely originating from a human source. Next slide. Okay, with that, I will turn it over for recommendations.
Thank you, Vanessa. So with this data analysis in mind, what's the regulatory context? So under the Clean Water Act, discharges to rivers and streams require permits. 3 kinds of permits are relevant to the study area. For this project, we assumed that the wastewater treatment plants are in compliance with their permits and not a major source of bacteria. Discharges from combined sewers are regulated under the EPA's 1994 Combined Sewer Overflow Policy, which requires that CSO systems reduce their overflow volume by 85% or limit the number of overflow events. New Jersey and Pennsylvania have a municipal separate storm sewer system program, an MS4 program, that currently addresses pollution more specifically around nutrients and sediments, not bacteria under this permit program. So there is really no specific plan or timeline for addressing any bacteria impairments that are related to discharges from MS4 systems into the study area. And in terms of public health, swimming beaches must be tested to ensure that the bacteria levels do not exceed public health standards. Next slide. So the permit holders in our study area. So we have 3 CSO permittees and many MS4 permittees. It's important to note that the CSO permit holder and the MS4 permit holder may not be the same entity for the same community. The CSO permittees in the 3 CSO permittees here all adopted the 85% reduction target under the CSO policy and have set out how they will meet the minimum controls and volume reductions that they need to achieve using both gray and green infrastructure in their long-term control plans. With MS4 permits, although they're not currently designed to specifically address bacteria, some of the minimum controls and best management practices implemented for compliance do result in some reductions in bacteria levels. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of a visual in terms of understanding the MS4 entities that could be impacting the study area, this is the Delcora service area. It includes a lot of municipalities, not just Chester, and it's Chester where there's some area that's combined sewer, but the rest of it is separate. And so all of these other municipalities, all of these little, outlined municipalities, all are MS4 permittees, and all of their discharges are impacting the study area. Next slide, please. The three CSO managers have made significant financial commitments to reach the 85% reduction in volume as part of their long-term control plans. And this slide just shares what those numbers look like for budget year 2023. So these are big challenges costing a lot of money. Next slide. The number of CSO events and the volume of discharges has dropped significantly since the long-term control plans were adopted, but we still have 10 to 15 years to complete those long-term control plans as shown in this graphic, and that's a long time. Next slide. So the data shows a lot of variation in bacteria levels. The regulatory programs aren't really addressing MS4 bacteria discharges, and our CSO remediation challenges are big and expensive. Nonetheless, there are important opportunities for action broadly across the study area and at specific locations. And in developing a set of recommendations, our focus was on investments that have multiple benefits and can be planned and executed relatively quickly, ideally within the next 5 years. So we have a set of recommendations that apply across the entire study area, and they include identifying community priorities for water recreation, advocating for non-debt financing and funding, collaborating across multiple entities to collect and share more data to improve our understanding, and implementing green stormwater infrastructure everywhere with the greatest potential here in our MS4 communities. That's not all of the recommendations here, but a summary. And there's more information about all of them in the report. Next slide. We also talk about 6 areas of focus that were identified. These could be good candidates for testing out the effectiveness of specific strategies, assuming that they are confirmed in a community-led process as being priority sites. These sites represent a confluence of water quality conditions, physical factors, and equity considerations. There's at least one site in each one of the largest communities in the study area, Camden, Chester, and Philadelphia. They already have the potential for access for water recreation. Some of them are already close to meeting standards most days of the year, and some were suggested by stakeholders. Next slide. So in terms of site-specific recommendations, we have a set of what I'm referring to here as fast and low-cost strategies. Again, keeping in mind the data analysis, having a site-specific approach is supported by that analysis. So these ideas could be tailored depending on that site's specific characteristics. But I need to emphasize that fast and low cost is relative here, right? Deploying these strategies could be in the millions of dollars, depending on the size of the sewer shed or drainage area, the cost of land, the number of inlets and outlets, for example. Nonetheless, piloting a mix of these strategies at specific locations holds significant promise to expand water recreation opportunities faster in the study area. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Cynthia. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ellen, and the rest of the study team for these very helpful presentations. We're now going to turn to a panel of experts to provide some reflections on the report methodology, findings, and recommendations. And we'll start off with Beth Brown with the Delaware River Basin Commission.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me today. As Cynthia said, my name is Beth Brown, and I'm the Director of External Affairs and Communications at the Delaware River Basin Commission. On behalf of our staff, I want to commend the Water Center on this report and express our appreciation for being a project partner and the opportunity to provide feedback on the draft report. The DRBC is a federal interstate compact agency, which means that Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Delaware along with the federal government, are equal partners in a water resources planning, development, and regulatory agency, delivering water security for over 14 million people. And our Delaware River Basin Compact is federal law and law in each of the basin states. The DRBC supports the Clean Water Act goals, including the goal to achieve swimmable waters throughout the basin. What that looks like and how we achieve measurable water quality improvements will require a braided approach or integrated efforts in 3 distinct areas, which the Water Center's report today has helped highlight. And the first is regulation and policy, providing a backbone of expectations from the local to state and regional level. The second is in the data science, technology, and local knowledge area, localized monitoring and assessment, as was reported today, forecasting, notification tools, and other monitoring technologies. And last, investment and infrastructure, whether green or traditional gray, as well as public health, to really understand the times and locations and needs to improve the situation for recreational use throughout the Delaware estuary. To the first area, as a regulatory agency, DRBC sets designated uses for the water and the water quality criteria to protect those uses. These are relevant under both the Clean Water Act and the Delaware River Basin Compact. And each basin state's water quality regulations tend to refer or defer to DRBC for the main stem standards because of our nature as an interstate waterway. The DRBC has water quality criteria for bacteria that's protective of recreation. And as you heard, for this 27-mile stretch of the Delaware River around Philadelphia and Camden, it's designated for secondary contact recreation. So before we update the designated use to primary contact, we first seek to understand how protective water quality could be attained. And that brings us to that second point of data, science, technology, and knowledge. DRBC staff routinely monitor bacteria levels in surface water to ensure our existing water quality criteria are being met. But in 2019, DRBC began a multi-year special bacteria monitoring study in this urban stretch to assess the likelihood of achieving water quality criteria to support primary contact recreation. And the key here is that our data were collected near shore to complement the center channel data that we routinely collect as part of our Delaware Estuary water quality monitoring program. Those monitoring results indicate that water quality criteria for primary contact recreation were not attained in the study area. However, as this report also saw, some sites could be closer to achieving criteria than others. But how? And again, the report today also highlights this is an infrastructure and investment need, as well as a science and information need, as well as a policy and regulatory need. For some issues like CSOs and other areas, there are known solutions and technologies to improve operation of existing systems, to minimize water entering combined systems through green infrastructure and low impact development. And as many systems implement long-term control plans, reducing and eliminating those discharges. The cost and scale of fully implementing these plans ranges widely, and funding opportunities and cost burdens should be carefully evaluated and right-sized. So braiding this all together, how are we as the regulatory agency moving the needle? The DRBC is a convener of a recreational uses co-regulator work group, which includes representatives from US EPA Regions 2 and 3, Pennsylvania and New Jersey DEPs, and Delaware DNREC. And together, we're developing and executing a strategy for enhanced recreational uses in this area. The strategy includes activities on a 5-year timeline, along with longer-term activities, which the DRBC and the co-regulators are working through before designating primary contact recreation as the applicable recreation use for this region. A full list of those actions, the near and long term, were presented to our Water Quality Advisory Committee in May 2022, and that presentation is available to the public. Since that time, we've begun and in some cases completed several of the near-term activities. These include assessing guidance on primary and secondary contact recreation according to the activity and location, continuing our data collection to really define which areas are more or less likely to support primary contact, and continuing to differentiate proportions of human versus animal-derived bacteria, and developing modeling that can simulate current and projected bacterial loads. We've also, as part of this short-term and near-term list, evaluated this water center study, and the comments were provided, and we'll consider the results presented here today. There was also a report on hazards in the river developed by the Water Department, Philadelphia Water Department, and other stakeholders that was also reviewed. And we've evaluated the performance of some newer technology to evaluate near real-time bacterial data. And that was deployed in conjunction with our partners at USGS and with funding from the William Penn Foundation. And we're continuing and in some cases enhancing CSO permit oversight, which includes identifying funding opportunities for CSO infrastructure upgrades. So those are some of the 5-year planning horizon activities that are either underway or already completed. And in the longer term, we're looking to recommend site-specific locations and conditions for rulemaking to revise the designated use to primary recreation. DRBC will continue to coordinate with its Water Quality Advisory Committee on the assessment and next steps. Those meetings are open to the public, and we welcome participants here to get involved, come to the meetings, and sign up to stay updated. And I'll drop a link in the chat to our mailing lists. And so despite the long-term nature of the investment and investigations needed to achieve measurable water quality improvement, DRBC and co-regulators have an aligned interest in making continued improvements in water quality in the urban estuary and providing additional opportunities for safe and equitable recreational uses. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Beth. And now we'll turn to Chloe Wong with Bertram's Gardens for her reflections on the report and its findings.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Chloe Wong. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the River Program Manager at Bartram's Garden in Southwest Philadelphia. Thank you to our hosts for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. Bartram's Garden is one of the recommended focus areas highlighted in the Water Center's report, and our site really illustrates the intersection of water recreation and access, water quality, and policy. Bartram's is an historic garden and public park located along the tidal Schuylkill River. And in the past, this section of the river has been heavily polluted and rendered inaccessible by industry. But water quality has improved dramatically since the passage of the Clean Water Act. Our river program focuses on making this public waterway as accessible as possible and responds to a huge demand for water recreation. Our volunteer-powered community boathouse offers free public boating and fishing programs, which welcomed over 3,000 participants in 2023, many of them first-time or beginner boaters. And many more people access the water on their own from our dock. However, we still face a frequent and persistent source of pollution from combined sewer overflows, which leads us to cancel about a quarter of our scheduled programs in an effort to protect guests from this health hazard. When the boathouse opened in 2015, there was little historical water quality data from this section of the river to inform sound cancellation and safety practices. And since 2018, we have been collecting our own data through a community science water quality monitoring initiative. We use this data to both inform our internal protocols and to advocate for better external monitoring and protection of the tidal Schuylkill River. From our community collected data, we have seen that E. coli levels in the river are highly variable, and there is not a simple way to predict these numbers based on rainfall. We have also seen potential for the tidal Schuylkill to achieve swimmable water quality in sustained dry weather in the absence of CSOs. In the summer of 2022, Philadelphia had a severe drought. The rainfall that July was a third of the average of July rainfall in the 3 previous years and 2023. And in that month, our nearshore E. coli data met EPA primary contact criteria with a geometric mean well below the EPA threshold. Unfortunately, in contrast to that, in late 2022 through 2023, we consistently measured the highest E. coli counts we have ever seen, even after multiple days of dry weather, leading us to suspect a dry weather CSO issue. So being familiar with the need for more data collection and action on bacterial pollution in the tidal Delaware and tributaries, I'm glad that the Water Center has undertaken this multidisciplinary study. The report underscores the complexity of these environmental systems with the interplay of many factors affecting water quality. It is difficult to execute a well-controlled study looking at dry and wet weather and to draw confident conclusions about the transient conditions that produce different given water quality outcomes. However, the report presents plenty of evidence that CSOs are detrimental to water quality. It affirms that CSOs are a major problem that will only continue to worsen with climate change. This needs to be addressed with greater, more comprehensive investment and attention in order to sustain the momentum of improving access to the waterways. I appreciate the breadth of possible CSO mitigation solutions put forward in the report. The initial recommendations to pilot over the next 5 years are a good place to start, including existing system maintenance, given our observation of highly elevated E. coli in all weather conditions over the last year. I also agree with the emphasis on collaboration as the key to successful remediation, leveraging the power and expertise of diverse stakeholders for public benefit. I am glad that the value and potential of community science in this collective work is being recognized. And I hope that our agencies, local governments, utilities, researchers, nonprofit, and community organizations will take seriously the priority of fulfilling the potential of public waterways to support the highest level of access and get to work with a spirit of cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. We're now going to turn to Mark Camerata with the Philadelphia Water Department. Mark.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Chloe and Beth, for your previous remarks. Yes, everyone, my name is Mark Camerata. I'm with the Philadelphia Water Department. I serve as the Deputy Water Commissioner for Planning and Environmental Services here. I have the privilege to do that for the last 8 years or so in my 26+ year career here with the Water Department. I'm really happy today to share a utility perspective on this study and the implications referenced therein. And I think it's really important maybe to start some of my points here with letting you know, the organization I represent here, that I have the privilege to represent here. The Water Department has the obligation to plan for, operate, and maintain infrastructure necessary to purvey high-quality drinking water and to provide an adequate and reliable water supply for all household, commercial, and community needs, and to sustain and enhance the region's watersheds and quality of life by managing wastewater and stormwater effectively as well. Our utility seeks to be customer-focused, delivering services in a fair, equitable, and cost-effective manner with a true commitment to public involvement. We've served this city and this region for nearly 2 centuries, and the utility's vision for the future includes a clear and active role in economic development of Greater Philadelphia and leaving behind a legacy of environmental stewardship. I say that because that is the soul of the Water Department. That is who we serve, the 1.6 million people we serve here in Philadelphia, and the reason we spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year of ratepayer money to try to deliver the services we do. My primary reflection, I think, on this report is really best captured in the concluding statement in the executive summary of this report. And I'm going to read it to you. Community residents, business owners, elected officials, water system managers, clean water advocates, recreationers, and funders are all essential to advancing water quality in this study area. All the stakeholders that are mentioned there have a role in a cleaner Delaware River and the tidal tributaries in this area. I think it's critically important to identify common goals and funding priorities, because more important than any specific action mentioned in this report is the partnership across all stakeholder groups, embracing a shared vision for sustained, meaningful progress. That's in the report. That's not my words. That's in the report. But I think that completely reflects, where we are right now and where we need to go. I think today's webinar is a critical step in getting us communicating again. And I think, I implore all of us to dedicate our energy in identifying the next few forums where we can continue this critical dialogue, where we can share partnership and really develop this shared vision for meaningful progress in this river. Reflections on the study. The Water Department agrees with the findings what's in this report. And I want to thank the Water Center, like others have done. I want to thank the Water Center. I want to thank the Michael Baker team, Mr. Cavallo, for your work in really synthesizing the results of all that sampling data generated and collected by DRBC and by the Water Department. I appreciate the extra effort the Water Center did in performing their own wet weather sampling that they did in August of 2021. Primary contact water quality recreation standards are not being met in wet and dry weather, wet or dry weather, as was previously stated. We agree that concentrations seem higher along the shoreline as opposed to center channel. We agree that sites appear to consistently have relatively higher level of bacteria than others, and some are lower than others. Bacteria data are naturally variable, and as such, the Water Department recommends that we continue to monitor and collect additional data utilizing accredited laboratories, approved methods, and proper sampling dilution. So gathering more information is of critical importance. The point about long-term control plans. You saw Ellen had mentioned the Water Department's long-term control plan, taking us through 2036, Camden County Municipal Utility Authorities through 2035, Delcora's through 2040. They're all ongoing. Overall, our CSO reduction plan is in its 13th year of our 25 years for Philadelphia. Our ratepayer impact is a major challenge of what can be done, especially considering a wide variety of new unfunded obligations that are being presented to ourselves. The Water Department's plan, Green City Clean Waters, has committed to an 8 billion gallon reduction in combined sewer overflow on an annual basis. I want to highlight what the plan will achieve and what the plan will not achieve. I want to be clearly honest and state that at the conclusion of our plan, we will still have on average a remaining 5+ billion gallons of combined sewer overflow at the conclusion of our long-term control plan. I also want to share that although the program was projected 15+ years ago to cost about $2 billion, projected estimates are in the range of $4 to $5 billion of investment to tackle this issue alone, not counting all the other requirements and obligations that we have as a water utility. I want to highlight that the construct of our Green City Clean Waters plan was predicated on adaptive management and structured around financial capability and ratepayer affordability, which is key in why it looked the way it did, the components it involved, and the costs we were able to identify. I want to reiterate again, the Water Department capital budget, just to give a scale on what we do as a water utility, our capital budget alone for water, wastewater, and stormwater services over the next 6 years is almost $5 billion. I want to mention that the city does support safe recreation in the Tidal and Delaware, Delaware and Schuylkill rivers. And we're thrilled to see so many people returning to our once neglected waterfronts to enjoy recreation on and along our rivers. I know there's been a lot of concern over controversy or anything about, our concern about recreation. And I personally think it's overblown. I think the recreation we're seeing is secondary contact and is very low risk from a public health perspective. And it's really exciting to see that increasing. We see program operators and folks bringing folks to the waterfront are responsible, and they do inform participants about the risks of aquatic recreation, and in many cases cancel activities due to these CSO events. Excuse me. We acknowledge that a small population of people that engage in riskier immersive recreation like swimming are doing so by way of personal choice. But I also hope that we can acknowledge that swimming does pose significant risks due to fast-moving currents, through to deep water, due to commercial shipping, due to debris, and to a highly developed urban shoreline that unfortunately frequently blocks safe egress from water to the land. I want to close my points here with the way I started, and that's really sharing an excitement and a want to continue these honest conversations about the benefits of achieving primary contact recreation, but the costs in doing so. It may take decades for the city to achieve swimmable conditions, And these costs must absolutely be balanced with multiple evolving regulatory obligations, including replacing lead service lines, protecting our drinking water from emerging contaminants like PFAS, managing nutrients, improving dissolved oxygen in our water bodies from our treatment plants, and even considering impending municipal separate stormwater requirements. A lot of obligations. We're beholden to our ratepayers here in Philadelphia, but I think through the multiple decades, we've shown a commitment to improving water quality in the river. And again, I look forward to our continued conversations on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. We're now turning to Sarah Lee Gonzalez with Urban Promise.
Hello, my name is Sarah Lee Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at Urban Promise in the Office of Experiential Learning as the Environmental Education Program Director. I just want to thank everyone for having us in the webinar and for everyone's work that went into this study. So as I said, I work for Urban Promise and we're in Camden, New Jersey. Part of our work is teaching and leading water sampling at 3 sites, which were highlighted in the study at Kane Avenue Dam. We also conduct water sampling at Cooper River Yacht Club and at Pine Point, which has had some remarking results. We conduct year-round sampling led by our students. And so in the summer, we provide a river guide program where we employ students in the area. And last summer, we took out around 800 individuals on private and public paddles of our local waterways, including the Delaware, the Cooper, and Newton Creek. So our water sampling supports the safe recreation of our waterways, and we have been collecting water samples for about a decade now. Our water sampling is used as a tool for knowledge for our team as we plan these paddling events, and we would love to see it grow into a tool for our community as more waterfront access is being developed in around Camden. For example, there's Gateway or Kramer Hill Park, and the increased recreational access of these parks is showing that there has been a lot of investments in the green spaces in and around Camden. For example, Kramer Hill was once an abandoned landfill and underwent intense soil remediation, and it's now a beautiful space offering 3 miles of walking, biking paths, a fishing pier, and a kayak loading dock. So it's clear that people are coming to Camden and in Camden and are recreating in our waterways, and we are here to, and this study shows that we are increasing access and want to make sure that everyone who engages with our water is doing it safely. Pine Point was highlighted in the study, and it's one of our launching spots for summer events. And as the study showed, it's just about 8,500 feet downstream of Camden's largest CSO. And while there are differences of dry and wet weather across the study area, the results of the study showed that Pine Point had consistently high levels of bacteria. We always conduct water sampling before our public paddling events to ensure that we're not exposing our participants to unsafe levels of bacteria, but it's clear that we have to be hypervigilant when planning paddling events and preparing for them. We usually host around 20 paddling events each summer, and at least 2 are postponed or canceled due to high levels of bacteria, mainly following a storm event. And this is a public health concern. And at Urban Promise, we're dedicated to taking people out on the water safely, while also advocating for increased recreational use of the water and in improving water quality. So of the proposed solutions of the study, 3 in particular stood out, which is, of course, increasing green stormwater infrastructure and doing it creatively with community input to make sure that the implementation of this is prioritizing equity and their sovereignty. I also would like to see more increased sampling especially to include sediment sampling. And even though we have a decade of experience of water sampling, our data is only useful when applied in real life situations. So I look forward to increasing, hopefully, the sampling frequency and improving our techniques as our capacity and expertise grows around the region. I also hope that there's more of a spotlight on the tidal tributaries and the importance of collecting water quality data at areas like Cooper River and at Pine Point. I also appreciate the inclusion of community science as a solution by empowering environmental justice communities and increasing the access to recreation around Camden. I've seen the power of how having our students conduct these water quality samples and have sort of a say in what's going on in the community really empowers them and empowers their learning, and also empowers or increases their use of our recreational waters. And so for us, our next steps are to continue improving our techniques and continue to find creative ways to apply our data for the benefit of the community and for the benefit of public officials to help them make data-informed decisions. I'm looking forward to the creative solutions and creative conversations and partnerships that come from this webinar and the discussions that follow. And I also want to thank everyone else that spoke before me and shared their input. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Lee. I just want to do a quick reminder for those of you with questions to put those in the question and answer feature in Zoom, and we'll be turning to those in a minute. But we're going to finish up our reflections panel with Carol Collier with the Academy of Natural Sciences.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm with the Academy, part of Drexel University as a senior advisor, and I was formerly the executive director of the Delaware River Basin Commission. And first, I want to commend University of Pennsylvania Water Center on this report. And I really valued being on the advisory team. It's well written, provides valuable data on existing conditions, highlights problem areas, and makes suggestions for moving forward on a number of fronts. And just a couple of examples. You know, the Philadelphia Green City Clean Water Plan and the Long-Term Control Plan were innovative at the time they were written. The focus on green stormwater infrastructure, GSI, was applauded internationally. But that was many years ago. PWD has done a lot in that time and has some big projects proposed, but we now see the impacts of climate change on the system, more intense storms, sea level rise, etc., and the need for more focus on the underserved, more vulnerable communities. There is a chance to use the adaptive management approach, so we can hope that these issues will be taken seriously. PWD has a new climate resilience guidance that requires that all projects are reviewed with a climate lens. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Another issue that's in there is, why do we have sewage in our waters when it's not raining, dry weather flows? Sewage is getting into our creeks and rivers by stormwater outfalls in separate sewer areas, illicit connections, and some CSO problems, as highlighted by Ellen. We need to look at these areas as well as work on a proposed long-term control plan. As stated in the report, the Pennsylvania DEP and the New Jersey DEP currently do not require reductions to bacteria loadings through their MS4 programs. And at least on the Pennsylvania side of the study area, the permits are out of date. With 9 tributaries in the study area on the Pennsylvania side, there are more than 50 MS4 permittees whose stormwater discharges flow to the study area. And on the New Jersey side, there are more than 30 MS4 permittees, stormwater outlets, in Camden County within the Delaware River watershed, quoting from the report. So now I'd like to turn to how we can use this report to move forward. It really provides an excellent jumping off point for additional work, and here are a few priorities. The report highlights 6 focus areas for action. And what could the next steps be? 1, we really need to prioritize key watersheds and sewer sheds where improvements will improve the lives of the underserved residents by reducing basement flooding of sewage contaminated water and or access to cleaner, safer water for recreation. Think trails along waterways, wading, getting out on the water. Folks who do not have the means to escape the heat by going to the shore or the Poconos, being given outlets in the city to connect with nature. And the Academy has a neighborhood study that can really help with this effort. Using a watershed approach, which I highly recommend, integrated water management, can evaluate issues of not only the CSOs, but those upstream separate wastewater treatment plants, stormwater outfalls, and illicit connections. And we have to remember that sewage discharge to streams when it's not raining is illegal. I suggest that community councils be developed in these priority watersheds, a basis of science developed to target locations for sewage leaks when it's not raining, that dry weather problem, and a plan developed with the communities, being called a blue-green plan, that can describe their wishes and goals and actions needed to meet those goals. This could include increased greening of the neighborhoods that will also reduce stormwater runoff, increase access to rivers and creeks where it's safe to do so, and whatever else it takes to improve water quality so it's safe and appealing. Second suggestion, reducing litter and poop. The municipal authority in Camden, under the leadership of Andy Cricken, used netting in their CSO systems to trap both litter and sewage solids. The nets have proved to be very effective. I would like to see the Philadelphia Water Department do a pilot netting trial on a few of the CSOs, maybe those that would be most helpful to cleaning up the underserved communities. Third suggestion is prioritize increasing non-debt or low increase funding. This work is expensive, as Mark noted, and we don't want to raise rates, especially on those who cannot afford it. But at least right now, there are incredible opportunities to pull in federal funding, and who knows how long that will last. There are some roadblocks, yes, but there seem to be avenues to push this through. We really need to prioritize that. Fourth, let's prioritize the assessment needed to upgrade the 27 miles of river designation to primary contact. And finally, achieving clean water requires a citywide campaign, as mentioned in the report and by Mark. PWD is doing a lot, but so much more is needed. Hopefully the mayor and city council can pull together teams to address this and engage stakeholders. In 2026, we have the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence right here in Philly. It's going to be a big thing. Wouldn't cleaning up our creeks and rivers be really a great accomplishment to crow about? And if Paris can clean up the Seine for swimmers and rowers for the Olympics, I really think we can do it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, and the rest of the panel for your very helpful comments. We now have, here, wait, I think we're done with this. Here we go. We now have about 15 minutes or a little bit more for your questions. So I'm going to ask all of the speakers today to turn on your cameras if you can, as we go through the questions. And again, if you have not already, please use the Q&A function to share your question with the group. So just starting here at the top, one question, this I think is for the study team. Did you do any testing to identify the contribution from dogs? Who's the best person to answer that one?
I can answer that. Well, we spoke with Dr. Salas at Drexel. He had a library of different bacteria and that he could apply qPCR to. And each one costs money. So we selected what we thought were the most representative. Human feces, which we're very interested in. We had Canada geese and then the gulls. So we did not do dog. We could have done dog. We could have done horse. We could have done, cat, sheep. I mean, he has an incredible library. And that's one thing I just want to say. You have a lot of resources in this area. You're blessed with good universities, organizations that are committed to it, wastewater treatment plant operators, cities. But to answer your question, no, but it could be done in the future. So there's a lot of data out there.
Great. Okay, next question. I think this is also for the study team. Are these high bacteria levels a result of a lack of proper wastewater treatment? And if so, are these lacking wastewater treatment plants in areas where environmental justice is a concern, or does it vary? So there's a few questions embedded in there. Who wants to take that one? Don't be shy.
Well, I can just say from looking at the sampling data and whatnot, I don't And as I said in my part of the presentation, we didn't look closely at the wastewater treatment plants because the assumption was that they are in compliance with their permits and that it's not likely, they're not likely the source. That discharges from those 4 wastewater treatment plants are not like, well, there are more than 4. Anyway, are not likely the major sources of bacteria, that the major sources are more likely to be CSO. So I can't give you a firm answer on that, but I think, I don't know if I don't know, Mark, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I just don't think that the wastewater treatment plants are the point of major concern here.
I will say that we are in compliance with our permits. That I can say for certain.
Right. So,
the reason we spend
yeah,
the money we do is to keep 3 massively complex wastewater treatment plants active and running 24/7, 365 days a year. We treat hundreds of millions of gallons of flow a day. And in wet weather conditions, that number almost reaches 1 billion gallons. We're making significant investments through our long-term control plan, through aging infrastructure improvements at these facilities, to ultimately be able to drive more wet weather flow through these treatment plants to potentially get us to almost a treatment capacity of 1.2 billion gallons a day. Our plants are not the issue. They meet effluent requirements that are in our permits, that are prescribed in detail and run through numerous regulatory organizations, and we are in compliance in our permits.
I'm sorry, Ellen, one
Go
second.
ahead, yeah.
Another body of evidence, and it's in a report, is that the midstream always seems to be better than the near shore. Your diffusers are out there in the river. So if there was that issue, they would be higher, or at least as high in the midstream. So that's another body of evidence suggesting it's near shore sources.
Yeah, and so just to really oversimplify this, if you think about the river system, there are a bunch of, and on the near, in the tidal reaches of the tributaries, there are a bunch of pipes, frankly, that discharge into the rivers. A few of those pipes, are coming from the wastewater treatment plants. There are a lot more pipes that are discharging either from stormwater runoff only or from combined systems. And so that was why the focus of this report was more on those kinds of discharges, because there are so many more pipes in this study area and in the tidal tributaries that are coming from those kinds of sources, not from the wastewater treatment plants.
Okay.
I just want to
moving
add
on,
one more thing,
sure,
if I
of
could.
course.
So typically we don't see fecal indicator bacteria originating from kind of wastewater discharges, but it is important to note that you can measure high levels of the HF183 marker, the human marker, from treated wastewater. And it's important to note that that is not a high risk public health risk because this water is treated. So we can measure those DNA markers from both live and dead bacteria. That means if it's been treated, those bacteria are dead. They're not viable. This is not a high health risk, but typically we can measure HF183 from wastewater discharges. So it's important in trying to understand the levels that we saw, that could be a contribution, but that is not a health risk concern.
Thank you for that. That's a very helpful clarification. Moving on, maybe a related question. It looks like dry weather conditions improved significantly in 2020 as compared to 2019. Can you provide a reason for this? And again, I think this is for the study team.
That data set was a at least that was presented was PWD data and DRBC data. That wasn't the data that we collected, and I don't remember, and possibly somebody from someone else, but I think there was a precipitation issue between those 2 years, and I'm not sure, but there were also somewhat different locations as well, but that wasn't part of our direct study. We evaluated that data.
Right. So Mark, do you want to jump in on that, or anybody else have a thought about this?
No, it's a very important point to highlight is we have to look at annual fluctuations in precipitation when we look at the data. I mean, clearly sorry, I'm in the city, there's sirens everywhere. I don't know what you can hear, but yeah, I mean, we just need to consider those annual fluctuations. So obviously correlation between precipitation and discharge and bacteria count. So just be careful when we look at individual years. I mean, I think it's really important to look at precipitation patterns. So
yeah, and I mean, even if
sorry, Ellen, just the point about, dry weather overflows. I mean, again, I'm representing a utility, but I can say other utilities have significant programs in place to mitigate dry weather discharges, and that's either through MS4 municipal separate storm sewer system requirements, cross connection and defective lateral abatement programs. We have sophisticated monitoring equipment throughout the system to keep an eye on defective laterals. We have an industrial waste program that does tremendous amount of outfall sampling. There's a lot of programs in place, sewer lining, stormwater regulations to kind of, manage water in the separate sewer areas. There are significant resources and investment to mitigate the effects of dry weather discharges as well. And, again, I can share a bunch of additional information. I think we've done so with the public on our dry weather overflow program to give some confidence in the level of attention that we provide to dry weather conditions in addition to wet weather programs.
Okay. Just being mindful of our time here, I'm going to jump to a question about citizen science in the that's been asked, asking where do those volunteers come from? For example, watershed groups. Also, what, if any, outreach by the organizations that are involved with citizen science? What outreach do you do to find either individual citizen scientists or groups of citizen scientists? Are you engaged at libraries, registered community organizations, or other public forums?
I guess I'll speak on behalf of what we do at Bartram's. So all of our water quality data over the last several years has been collected with youth interns who are high school students or recent high school graduates who are part of our Densham River Guardians youth internship. So they are actually involved in facilitating our public boating programs. And so it's like very meaningful for them to also conduct this water quality testing and see the connection between those two things, and to know that they are making a real contribution to knowledge about this area, this river that they are building a relationship with, and facilitating that relationship for others. And we also have a huge crew of boathouse volunteers who support those programs, and they have also been involved in the monitoring in the past. So really looking for people who have that connection with the river and can really care about these questions.
Great. I think this next question, Mark, may be for you. It's asking what weight does equity of access and climate change impacts? What weight do those issues play in the Philadelphia Water Department's Green City Clean Water Plan? It's a really big question, so I'm asking you.
It is a huge question, and I want to use something a bit more tangible and not be obtuse in kind of addressing this. But
Right.
We clearly have seen increase of flooding instances in a section of our community, in the Germantown section of our city. It's been going on for decades. It is one of our EJ communities, disadvantaged community. We've been thinking about ways to address flooding for a while now. And we're embarking on a dual tunneling conceptual plan at this point to try to mitigate combined sewer overflows while addressing flooding. I will be honest and say we're projecting this project, should it be able to move forward. We're doing kind of feasibility study at this point. We're looking at a project that could be anywhere from $500 million to $750 million. That tunnel, although it will alleviate flooding for certain storm events, will not eliminate flood risk in that community. So to think about climate change, I mean, you're talking about a potentially $1 billion asset that will not eliminate flooding in a community. The CSO benefit of that project could be maybe about 500 million gallons of CSO reduction in a year, of a program that will have multiple billions of gallons of overflow at the end of it. I'm sharing this as just trying to give a scale of the sense of what we're dealing with the impacts of climate change and flooding and the scale of the combined sewer overflow issue that's present. There's $1 billion asset that may get liftoff, which will take a bite out of our CSO program, will not eliminate flooding. And again, this is an unfunded project. It's not right now part of a CSO program. We're going to have to figure out a way to put that burden on the ratepayer if we can't find federal monies. The federal money is wonderful. We just announced yesterday a $25 million grant coming through the ARPA H2O funds to support, 3 projects here in the city. It's $25 million. Our capital budget next year is almost $750 million. So, the federal money is wonderful, right? To never look a gift horse in the mouth. But I think we're having scaling issues in our understanding and expectations of what we see. And I know today's conversation is focused on bacteria and combined sewers, and in some instances, municipal separate sewer discharges. But we need to consider that we provide safe drinking water, not just us, other utilities, safe drinking water and stormwater management for 2 million people in this region. So it's just a lot of responsibility, really challenging cost environment for us with numerous funding, unfunded mandates, heading our way that are going to further strain our ability to bring about this expected progress that I think we all want. I mean, I'm sitting here too. I drink the water here in Philadelphia. I want to recreate in these water bodies. I also pay our bills, right? So, we got to figure out what to do. It's a massively complex water resource environment that we're in right now. We have a lot of work to do. And again, I will state we need to have more forums where we can communicate and really share vision and goals of what we're trying to do. We cannot tackle these issues alone. So again, for those that know me personally, that is the most genuine statement you're going to hear from me in this entire conversation. Let's get together. Let's please talk. Let's figure out what to do, because us kind of talking through each other, over each other, around each other has not helped us in these last couple of years. I'll blame COVID for some of that, but we really need to have some meaningful communication again.
Thank you for that, Mark.
And
I
if I
want to
could
jump to a
jump
question
in,
about the
sorry.
tributary. I'm sorry.
Could I just jump in?
Of course.
I just wanted to kind of echo what Mark said, kind of about putting in the context of multiple issues all requiring investment, right? And so one of the issues that we're tracking and also involved in is on, kind of the other side of the coin of clean water, and that's fishable waters, right? So I think there's staff that can put something in the chat today just as sort of a public service. There's a comment period open right now for another major large-scale regulatory action in the Delaware estuary to upgrade standards for dissolved oxygen. So, I think, again, in this sort of like context of talking and big picture and coming together to solve problems at a big scale, it's important to flag for interested folks on this webinar that's another opportunity to speak up and get involved. So thanks.
Okay. We're almost out of time, so I want to turn to a question that has just jumped. There we go. On a slightly different subject, looking for thoughts about the tributaries, especially the Tacony and Frankford, which are at the heart of Philadelphia's urban watershed parks and provide really the only water access for enjoyment and recreation to a diverse set of underserved populations. So maybe we'll start with Ellen and see if other folks have thoughts as well, and we might need to leave it there.
Yeah, completely agree, right? Like this is a watershed fully within, well, mostly within the city that provides that access to a community that is really, frankly, in need of that access. And so having some particular focus on the TTF, I think, is absolutely justified. And I think Mark would agree on that too. I mean, Philadelphia Water does a lot of work in TTF, and I think having some strategies, as we laid out in the report, having some strategies that can be more watershed specific, site specific, that can help us, sort of adapt to this particular situations and the particular interests of the community is absolutely essential. So fully agree. And I think Carol pointed this out too. I fully agree that, if we can pivot to some very specific, deeper dives in some of the tributary areas, we would be thrilled to be part of those conversations.
And if I could just add, I think there was as this report developed in the beginning, it was really focused on the Delaware River. I mean, that was, the dollars provided. But as it went through, it was realized how important the tributaries are, not only for their impact to the main river, but the potential for recreation and really engaging with the community. So right on, Julie, we need to do that.
Anybody else have a last thought here? Because I think we are at time. Okay, well then with that, I'm going to thank all of the panelists for their participation, the study team for your excellent presentations, and all of you for attending and participating in this. There will be a recording of this emailed next week, and I think we'll get together and figure out how or whether we can address the questions that we did not have time to answer. I'm sorry for that, but I'm sure it's indicative of how what an important and extraordinary topic this is and the level of interest. So we'll try to answer those as well. And thank you all very much for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful
Thank you,
day.
Cynthia, for moderating.
Sure.
Thanks.